Something else happened in the wake of the midterm election, and Macomb County elected its first African-American and only African-American judge on the Macomb County Circuit Court. Here to talk to us, of course, is the Honorable Teri Lynn Dennings. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations again on your election, your elevation. You were appointed and then you ran to complete a partial term, 2 years now to 2024, right?
Correct.
But it amazes me because this is 2022 and Michigan and Macomb County is electing the first and the only African-American judge on the circuit court.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that it's expensive.
Right.
It's expensive. Historically, the range of successful judicial candidates in Macomb County for circuit court has been between $180,000 and $225,000 or $250,000 in some cases. So
to run a campaign.
Judicial campaign, successful judicial campaign.
Yeah.
So it requires a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you know, historically in minority communities, it's very difficult sometimes for us to be able to raise that type of capital.
But it's a very important position. I mean, you're a circuit court judge, so you deal with a range of cases across the county. So it would make sense why it's not easy to become a circuit court judge in a county like Macomb.
Yeah, I'm actually in the family division, so I'm family and juvenile judge.
Okay.
I handle adoptions, custody, parenting time, abuse and neglect, parental termination, divorces, among other things. So that is my division, and you're right, I handle that for the whole county. Yeah,
so tell me, what is it like for you to be where you are now as a judge in that circuit court? What has been the response from the African-American community? I know there's a growing African-American community in Macomb.
The response from the community, African-American and otherwise, has been very positive. When I found out that I was going to have opposition in this race, the legal community really rallied around me. The community really rallied around me, which helped me be able to raise the amount of money that I needed to raise to win my election.
Right.
The other judges on the bench, district and circuit, have been very cordial, amicable, and very open to providing me whatever resources I need to be successful.
So you've gotten support from your colleagues?
Absolutely.
But of course, does that mean that there is a realization that you're in a spot that, you know, someone that look like you and I have not been for decades in Macomb County?
Yeah, I mean, my colleagues and others in the legal community recognize.
Yeah.
I mean, they recognize that, you know, the demographics of the county have changed, but there has not been a corresponding change in demographics of the people, you know, in the judiciary. So, you know, progress takes time sometimes. And, you know, with me being there, I think that I've been able to prove in the short time that I'm there, you know, if there were any stereotypes to be had, I think that I've stomped those out. Yeah.
Well, I think before you, around the country, if we can nationalize this conversation for a minute, around the country we've seen, you know, trailblazing African Americans, you know, move on to becoming the first judge. You know, Constance Baker Motley, the late Constance Baker Motley, was a civil rights trailblazer, worked under Thurgood Marshall for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, became the first African American female federal judge. Of course, now Judge Jackson, Ketanji Brown Jackson of the Supreme Court. Here in Michigan, we had the late Judge Hood for the Michigan Court of Appeals. What I want to know from you, though, in terms of now that you're the first and the only African-American judge in the circuit court, how much does legacy here play into what you would do? Because it's one thing to be the first African-American judge in a space, it's another thing to be able to have a legacy that people look at and say, she was, in fact, Teri Lynn Dennings was a trailblazing judge.
You know, I don't really think about a legacy. I just think about that I just think about living my purpose and doing what I believe that I'm supposed to do, and trying to make good decisions and doing what I do with excellence and opening up doors for other people. So at the end of the day, my legacy will be whatever it is. But from day to day, I'm not really thinking, you know, what can I do? How can I create a legacy? I'm just thinking about bettering Macomb County, bettering my community, and improving access to law and focusing on my passion, which is the law.
a more prudent response. But let me ask you then the question of how we move beyond having more judges in the Macomb County bench.
That's a good question. I mean, look, the governor played a monumental role, and I tell people, whether you like the governor or don't like the governor changed my life, and the governor really made progress, for minority communities by placing me in the position that she placed me in. And so I think in some respects, it's having somebody that is able to give us those opportunities. But once we get those opportunities, we have to earn them, and then we have to be able to stay there. Right. So,
and I think what you're saying is important, because in the larger respect, we've seen, it was Democratic presidents who appointed black judges, even on the federal bench, whether it's a Judge Damon Keith and others, Constance Baker Motley. These were Democratic presidents. So I don't think it's so much of a surprise that a Democratic governor like Whitmer will appoint you to this position. But how we enhance the bench, right, to have more African-American judges, so that 20 years from now, we're not saying, well, Judge Lynn Dennings was the only one and there's no longer another judge.
Right. Well, first, let me just say this, because it became an issue in my race that I was appointed, as if I was the only or first person appointed.
Right.
A lot of the judges in Macomb County have been appointed, whether it be a Democratic or a Republican governor. So let me start by saying that. It's a very thorough vetting process. Let me also say that, because sometimes people think, oh, she just got picked for this reason or that reason. No, it's a complete process. But to your question, I think that a large responsibility lies on the individual, because I ran in 2016 for judge in Macomb County because I felt like there was a need. And I was involved in my community, in the places where I needed to be. And so when the opportunity arose, I was in a position to be considered for it. So I guess I would say that the attorneys that are in Macomb County who seek to one day want to be a jurist, the onus is on them in some respects to become involved in the community and let people know what it is that they're trying to do, so that they can get the resources that they need and build the relationships that they need to be able to capitalize on opportunities, or be in a position to create their own by running.
So when we look at you, sit in Macomb County, the bench, whether it's the African American community in Macomb County, whether it's other, let me just universalize it, call it Black Michigan. Black Michigan looks at you. You are kind of an ambassador being in that bench in itself from the black community. As we see other communities celebrate when one of their own sits on a bench. How do you see the role of a judge in addressing the questions of equity and racial justice outside of the parameters of politics? And I say this in the context of, when we think about other judges, we talk about, just in terms of, how they've been trailblazing when it comes to civil rights, their rulings like Judge Damon Keith, Constance Baker Motley. These are names that, of course, I'm referencing over and over again because, I mean, I call them the founding fathers of black jurisprudence in the country. In your case, though, what do you see is the role in today's world that we live in, is the role of the judge, a black judge, in advancing the issues of equity?
I think that at the end of the day, everybody that appears before a judge wants to be treated fairly and wants to be heard.
Right.
And so I think that that is the baseline. And that's the baseline in my courtroom, that everyone has an opportunity to be heard. Now, if you get crazy and go off the rails, you might lose that opportunity in one way or another. But I think the baseline is that everybody wants to be treated fairly. Everybody wants to have the law applied to their situation fairly and impartially and without bias.
So we find ourselves living in a moment where a lot of our institutions have come under distrust. We don't trust the political process. We don't trust it in places. And the judiciary remains perhaps one of the lasting vestiges of upholding the rule of law. And of course, someone might say, Bankole, but we know the judiciary has not been what it should be, you know, in the history of black folk. But my question to you, though, is how do we ensure, right, that the judiciary remains a trusted institution, that people who come before a judge feel like their rights are guaranteed, right? That they feel like they don't have to, you know, they feel like their rights are guaranteed, regardless of whether they have deep pockets or not.
No, that's a good question. That's
and you don't,
that's
you
a
don't,
question everybody. I mean, that's the question everybody, you know, wants the answer to.
Right.
And
will I be treated fairly? I mean, I think because it's a question that comes up, you know, and sometimes people say, well, you know, I don't trust the court system. You know, you have to have the kind of money that Elon Musk has to even be able to, you know, get anything in court. What I'm saying is for the average Joe who's watching now, oh, wow, you know, how do we ensure that people are treated fairly?
well, I mean, one way is to hold judges accountable. And how do you hold judges accountable? You hold judges accountable with your vote, like you hold any other elected official accountable. You hold them accountable with their vote. Now, you know, it takes a lot to unseat an incumbent in any type of elected position. We know that, but that is one way to hold people accountable. I know that the state court administrative office, they do surveys sometimes for the different courts. And, they collect surveys. So, you know, I guess complaining. There's a number of different agencies that oversee. You have the Judicial Tenure Commission. So there are different ways. I mean, when things are really egregious, people find a way. The flip side of that is that sometimes people take advantage of those avenues for making complaints that are not really founded. So I guess the number one way is by an individual's vote.
So as an African American female judge, let's talk about perhaps the essence here to have more black women on the federal on the bench. Period. Whether it's state or federal, whatever, you know, whether it's state or federal. How important is that? Because we don't find too many black female judges on the federal bench, on the state bench. Period.
I mean, it's important all over, not just for black judges, but for judges of all colors, all races, all backgrounds. I think that in my race in particular, it was my background that I tried to
sell.
You know, my background, you know, in civil and employment and labor and administrative law and, you know, having that perspective, I think adds value to the bench. So as many different perspectives and voices that we can have. We don't need everybody that's been doing the same thing.
Do you feel that sometimes the perspective that you feel that you bring to the bench is underappreciated?
I haven't been there long enough to allow it to show its value. But
just in a general context, though.
Not really. I think people, you know, say, wow, okay, she's handled all these different areas of law, so she can grasp different concepts and, you know, she's really interested in how the law works, and I really am interested in how the law works. So they talk about your versatility. Yes, my perspective. Yeah. So finally, what was it like when you walked into Macomb County Circuit Court with the understanding that you've been elected, with another understanding that you're the only African-American judge in the circuit court? Today was my first day back after 2 weeks vacation.
I'm glad I could pull you in on your first day back. So this is great.
You know, it was nice to finally be able to arrive and not have to think or be thinking in the back of my head about a campaign. And just being able to focus on serving the residents of Macomb County without the backdrop of, you know, a campaign. Just being able to breathe and really get into the weeds, so to speak, is my plan. Okay.
Well, we'll be watching. I want to say congratulations again.
Thank you.
Judge Teri Lynn Dennings, the only African-American elected judge in the Macomb County Circuit Court here on Sunday Nation. We'll be right back. Stay with us. I'm Bankole Thompson.